The conference room exploded with laughter. My son Julian stood on stage under bright lights, his expensive suit perfectly tailored, his smile wide and confident. Behind him, a projection screen showed a photograph I didn't know he had. Me at 43, hair tied back in a faded scarf, wearing rubber gloves, holding a mop in an office building hallway. The image was slightly blurred, taken without my knowledge. "And this," Julian said, gesturing dramatically at my younger self, "is my mom showing me early on that determination means cleaning up other people's messes." The audience roared. Cameras flashed. Someone in the front row actually wiped tears from laughing so hard. I sat frozen in the back, my hands gripping the edges of my metal folding chair. My face burned, my throat closed. This wasn't a tribute. This was a performance, and I was the punchline. When Julian's eyes found mine across the crowded room, something passed between us. Not love, not regret. Just acknowledgement that he knew exactly what he was doing. The applause swelled as he moved to his next slide. I stood up slowly, my purse clutched against my chest, and walked out before anyone could see me cry. Outside, rain fell in cold needles against my face. I stood on the sidewalk, shaking, trying to catch my breath. Cars passed, their headlights blurring through my tears. I was 52 years old, alone, and apparently the comedy material for my only child's corporate success story. My name is Marina Vale, and for 20 years I believed that love meant endurance, that if I just kept sacrificing, kept working, kept pouring everything I had into my son's future, he would understand what it cost. He would appreciate it. He would love me the way I loved him. I was wrong. I walked 6 blocks in the rain to the bus stop because I couldn't afford parking downtown. My shoes were the same ones I'd worn to his college graduation, now with worn heels and a small tear near the toe. When I finally sat down on the bus, water dripping from my coat onto the seat, I stared at my reflection in the dark window. The woman looking back at me was tired, broken, invisible. That night, I went home to my tiny apartment and stared at the framed college degree hanging on my wall. The one I'd helped him earn. The one that cost me everything. Years earlier, Julian was 10 years old. Small for his age, shy, always hungry no matter how much I fed him. We lived in a studio apartment where the heat only worked half the time and the neighbors fought through thin walls every night. I worked the night shift cleaning downtown banks, then mornings at a bakery boxing pastries and mopping floors. Between shifts, I slept 3 hours on a couch that smelled like cigarettes from the previous tenant. Julian would wake me up gently, his small hand on my shoulder, whispering that he'd made himself cereal for breakfast. One morning, he found me crying at the kitchen table, bills spread out like accusations. He climbed into my lap even though he was getting too big for it and wrapped his thin arms around my neck. "Mama, don't cry," he whispered. "When I grow up, I'm going to be rich, and you'll never have to work again." I held him tight and promised through my tears, "Someday, baby, you'll never have to struggle like I did." He pulled back and looked at me with those serious brown eyes. "You're my hero, Mama." I didn't know heroes could become jokes. The morning after the conference, my phone rang while I was making coffee in my small kitchen. Julian's name appeared on the screen. My hand trembled as I answered. "Mom." His voice was casual, almost cheerful. "Listen, about yesterday, you're not taking it personally, right? It was just humor. Everyone does those kinds of talks. It's called storytelling." I heard a woman's voice in the background, laughing at something. His fiancée, probably. The one who understood ambition. "You humiliated me in front of hundreds of people," I said quietly. "Oh, come on, Mom. Nobody was laughing at you. They were laughing at the situation. There's a difference." There wasn't a difference. Not to me. Not when that photograph showed the rawest moment of my life, reduced to comedy material for his professional advancement. "Julian, That was the hardest year of my life. Your father had just left. We had nothing. And look how far we've come, he said brightly. That's the point of the story. Struggle to success. People love that. That's when I realized he didn't feel sorry. The betrayal wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, calculated, and he genuinely didn't understand why I was hurt. I have to go, I whispered. I hung up before he could respond. I spent that entire day boxing up Julian's childhood. Every framed photograph from the living room. Every report card I'd saved. Every handmade Father's Day card where he'd crossed out father and written mother instead. The few birthday gifts he'd given me over the years. A scarf, a cheap necklace, a mug that said "World's Best Mom." I packed it all carefully into a cardboard box, sealed it with tape, and wrote his office address on top in black marker. The next morning, I sent it via courier with a note tucked inside. Return to sender. I no longer recognize the recipient. That afternoon, I walked past a community center and saw a flyer for free online business courses. Learn to build your future. I took a photo of the information with my phone. That night, while eating leftover rice and beans alone at my kitchen table, I registered for the first class. Introduction to Small Business Management. If I was going to disappear from Julian's life, I would disappear forward, not backward. I would rebuild myself, not for him, but for the woman I saw crying in that bus window. Months passed without contact. No calls, no texts, no apologies. I threw myself into work and learning. My shifts at the bakery became automatic. Muscle memory. Mix, knead, box, sell, clean, repeat. But in the evenings, I transformed my tiny kitchen into something else. I started making soap. Handmade bars with simple ingredients, lavender, oatmeal, honey. I'd always loved the idea of creating something pure with my own hands, something that couldn't be taken away or mocked. I followed online tutorials, measuring carefully, pouring into molds I fashioned from old containers. Each bar took days to cure, sitting on my kitchen counter like small promises. I named each batch in my head after memories. Survival was the plain oatmeal soap. Resilience was lavender and chamomile. Silence was unscented, just honest work. I didn't hate Julian. That's the strange part. I just wanted to matter again. To someone. Even if that someone was only me. At night, I'd hold a finished bar of soap, feel its weight, smell its gentle scent, and think about how something so small could represent starting over. 3 months after the conference, I sold my first batch at the weekend farmers market. 20 bars, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. I'd printed simple labels on my home computer. Handmade with care. By noon, everything was sold. A woman in her 60s bought 3 bars and said, "These are lovely. You should start your own brand." I smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. Maybe I will. That evening, I counted the cash, $48 after the market fee. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Earned through creation, not exhaustion. I celebrated with cheap wine and leftover pasta. But when I turned on the television to watch the news, there was Julian. He stood at a podium receiving an award for inspirational leadership in business. His speech was polished, practiced. Success isn't given. It's earned through dedication and hard work, he said, his voice confident. Those values run in my family. The camera panned to his fiancée in the audience, clapping elegantly. I almost threw the remote through the screen. Instead, I turned it off and went back to my soap molds. Some silences speak louder than broken glass. The next weekend at the farmer's market, an older woman at the booth beside mine noticed me wiping my eyes between customers. Her name was Therese. She sold handmade pottery, beautiful earthy bowls and mugs. "Rough morning?" she asked kindly. I tried to smile. "Rough year." She nodded knowingly. I started this booth after my son told me I was embarrassing his new family, said my clothes were outdated, my opinions too old-fashioned. He wanted me to stay home and stay quiet. I looked at her properly then. She had silver hair, laugh lines, and eyes that had clearly survived storms. "What did you do?" I asked. "I built this." She gestured to her pottery display. "Started from nothing, took classes, practiced until my hands cramped. Now I sell to galleries." She leaned closer. "Success is the sweetest silence. You don't need to prove anything to people who never valued you. You just need to prove it to yourself." Her words planted a seed that I watered with every bar of soap I sold that day. By evening, I'd made $63. More importantly, I'd made a friend who understood. I registered my business officially that month. Veil and Pure, handmade soaps inspired by resilience. The name felt right. Veil was my last name, the one I'd kept after the divorce because changing it cost money I didn't have. Pure was what I wanted my new life to be. Honest work, honest ingredients, honest purpose. I created an Instagram account, photographing my soaps on my kitchen windowsill where morning light made them glow. I wrote simple captions. "Made with love in a small kitchen. Starting over, one bar at a time." Orders began trickling in. 5 bars to someone in the next town. 3 bars to a woman who said my story inspired her. 10 bars to a small boutique willing to try my products on consignment. Each order, I handwrote a thank you note on recycled paper. "Thank you for supporting a dream." For the first time in my adult life, I started believing that maybe dignity could pay bills. That maybe my hands, worn from decades of cleaning other people's spaces, could create something valuable for myself. My kitchen smelled like lavender and hope. It was the best smell in the world. 6 months after that conference, Julian sent a text. "Mom, can we talk? I miss you." My hands trembled holding the phone. Part of me, the mother part that never fully dies, wanted to call him immediately, to hear his voice, to forgive, to pretend the humiliation never happened. But I didn't answer. Not that day. Not the next. A week later, he posted a photograph on social media. Him and his fiancée at some expensive restaurant, champagne glasses raised, both of them smiling perfectly. The caption read, "She understands ambition." It burned. Not like before, though. Before, his rejection felt like dying. Now it felt like fuel. Like confirmation that I'd made the right choice by choosing silence over begging for scraps of his attention. I screenshot the post, printed it, and pinned it to the small bulletin board above my workspace. Not to torture myself, but to remind myself why I was rebuilding, why I was choosing me. That night, I made a new soap blend, bergamot and sea salt. I called it Forward, because that was the only direction that mattered anymore. 1 year after starting Veil and Pure, a local journalist discovered my story. Someone had tagged the newspaper in an Instagram post about my soaps, mentioning I was a former housekeeper who'd built an eco-brand from her kitchen. The reporter called me on a Tuesday morning. "Mrs. Veil, I'd love to feature your business in our Community Voices section." The article ran the following weekend. From mop to mogul, local woman builds success after years of struggle. They used a photo of me in my kitchen, surrounded by soap molds, smiling genuinely for the first time in print. The story went viral locally. Orders flooded in. My phone buzzed constantly. A small organic market called, asking if I'd be interested in stocking their shelves. The same week the article published, news broke that Julian's company was under investigation. Something about labor practices overseas, exploited workers, falsified reports. His confident face appeared on the news, but this time under very different headlines. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call him. I just lit a candle that night, lavender scented, and whispered to the flame, "Lesson 1: Humility." Julian's fiancé messaged me late one night. I didn't have her number saved, but I knew it was her from the profile picture. Mrs. Vale, this is Simone. Julian doesn't know I'm reaching out. He's under investigation. He's terrified. The company might collapse. I thought you should know. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part, the mother part, felt sick. He'll be fine, I typed back. He's always fine. He's not fine, she replied. He's falling apart. He keeps saying he wishes he could talk to you. I didn't respond. What was there to say? That I'd warned him arrogance has consequences? That treating people as disposable eventually leaves you alone? Instead, I turned off my phone and went back to work. 3 custom orders needed to be finished by morning. My business didn't stop just because his life was crumbling. Maybe that was cruel. Or maybe it was just balance. The universe correcting itself in ways I never could. The news coverage intensified. Julian's company had falsified sustainability reports while using exploited labor in manufacturing plants overseas. Investors pulled funding. Partners distanced themselves publicly. His confident grin, the one from all those success articles, now appeared under headlines like corporate scandal and ethics investigation. I watched it unfold from my small apartment, feeling strange and detached. This wasn't the revenge I'd imagined during those early angry nights. I'd never wished for his destruction. I just wanted acknowledgement, an apology, basic respect. But life doesn't always wait for our permission to deliver lessons. One evening, Therese called me. Did you see the news about your son? Yes, I said quietly. How do you feel? She asked. I thought about it honestly. I don't feel happy. I just feel like maybe the universe is better at justice than I ever could be. She was quiet for a moment. That's called wisdom, Marina. Most people never get there. After we hung up, I lit another candle. This time I whispered, Lesson 2. Consequences. 3 weeks later, someone knocked on my apartment door at 8 in the evening. I looked through the peephole and my breath caught. Julian stood in the hallway looking nothing like the polished man from the conference stage. His hair was unwashed, his clothes wrinkled, his eyes were red. I opened the door slowly. Mom, he said, his voice breaking. Please, I just need somewhere to stay, just for a few days. I let him in, but only into the living room, not into my bedroom, my workspace, my sanctuary. Those were mine now. He looked around the small apartment, noticing the changes. Soap molds on every surface, the scent of lavender and eucalyptus in the air, the small drying racks near the window. This place smells amazing, he said softly, sinking onto my old couch. I stood near the doorway, arms crossed. That's what success smells like, I replied. He looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw the boy who used to call me his hero, but I also saw the man who'd called me a punchline. Can I stay? He asked. Tonight, I said. We'll talk in the morning. Over dinner, simple pasta with vegetables, Julian finally spoke the words I'd waited months to hear. I mocked you because I was ashamed. I stopped eating and looked at him. Ashamed of what? Of where we came from. Everyone else at the company had perfect families, rich parents, college funds, summer homes, and I had a mother who cleaned toilets. His voice cracked. I thought if I made it funny, if I turned it into a success story about overcoming poverty, people wouldn't pity me. I set my fork down carefully. So you decided to humiliate the one person who would have defended you to her last breath. He started crying. Real tears, not the polished emotion of a corporate presentation. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I destroyed everything, including us. I watched him cry and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not forgiveness. Just emptiness where love used to live. You didn't destroy everything, Julian, I said quietly. You destroyed yourself. I'm still here. I rebuilt. But you? You built your success on shame and lies, and now it's all collapsing because that foundation was rotten. He looked at me, desperate. Can you forgive me? Not tonight, I answered honestly. The next morning, Julian's former business partners called my phone. Somehow they'd gotten my number. Mrs. Vale, we're trying to help Julian rebuild his reputation. If you could make a public statement supporting his character, it would mean everything. I held the phone, staring at my soap molds curing on the counter. Why would I do that? Because he's your son, the voice said, as if that explained everything. For a moment, mother's instinct pulled at me. The part of me that used to sacrifice everything, that used to believe love meant endless forgiveness. But I'd learned something in my year of silence and soap making. Love also means boundaries. I'm sorry, I said firmly, but I can't vouch for character I haven't seen. I hung up before they could argue. Julian was still asleep on my couch. I looked at him, this man I'd raised, and realized something profound. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them fall. Let them face the consequences they've earned. Let them learn what you couldn't teach them through sacrifice. This time, my silence would speak louder than any defense ever could. Vale and Pure grew faster than I'd ever imagined. A major eco-conscious store offered partnership. Local boutiques featured my products in window displays. I was invited to speak at a small business owners' conference about building from nothing. The morning of my presentation, I stood in front of a mirror practicing. I wore a simple dress, my mother's old necklace, and shoes I'd finally been able to replace. I looked different. Not just older, but stronger. Solid. The conference room was small compared to Julian's corporate stage, maybe 50 people instead of hundreds. But when I told my story, really told it, about being a housekeeper, about raising a son alone, about being humiliated and choosing to rebuild rather than break, the room went completely silent. When I finished, the applause was genuine, warm. Several people had tears in their eyes. After my talk, a woman approached me. Thank you for sharing that. My daughter thinks I'm an embarrassment because I work retail. Your story just gave me permission to be proud. In the back of the room, partially hidden behind a column, stood Julian. He'd come. He'd listened. And for the first time, he'd heard. 2 weeks later, my ex-husband appeared. Kenneth. The man who'd left us drowning in debt when Julian was 8, who'd disappeared for over a decade, suddenly stood at my farmer's market booth. Marina, he said, smiling like no time had passed. You look great. I heard about your business. I continued arranging soap displays without looking at him. What do you want, Kenneth? I've changed, he said. I'm sober now. Been in therapy. I wanted to reconnect. See if maybe we could talk. I finally looked up at him. He'd aged badly. His hair was thin, his face lined with decades of choices I'd never understand. You left when life was hard, I said calmly. When Julian needed you. When I needed you. You don't get to come back now that life smells like lavender and profit. He blinked, surprised by my directness. I made mistakes. I'm trying to make amends. Then make them with yourself, I said. Because I've already made peace with your absence. It taught me I was stronger alone. He stood there for a moment, then walked away without another word. Closure, I realized, doesn't always require forgiveness. Sometimes it just requires honesty. Julian stayed in my apartment for 3 weeks. Not because I invited him to, but because he had nowhere else to go. His fiancée had left him. His friends had distanced themselves. His money was frozen during the investigation. Every morning, he'd wake up on my couch and watch me work. Mixing ingredients, pouring molds, wrapping finished products. He never offered to help. He just observed, like he was trying to understand something he'd missed. One evening, he finally asked, "How did you do it?" "Do what?" "Survive. After Dad left. After everything fell apart. How did you keep going?" I set down the soap I was wrapping and looked at him directly. I didn't have a choice. I had you. And I believed that if I could just hold on long enough, things would get better. They did, he said quietly. For me. Not for you. No, I agreed. Not for me. Not back then. He was quiet for a long time. I need help, Mom. Real help. Not money. Guidance. I don't know how to start over. I poured him tea and sat across from him. Then start by apologizing. Not to me. To yourself. He looked confused. For what? For becoming someone your 10-year-old self would be ashamed of? Julian found one of our old photographs the next morning. It was tucked inside a book on my shelf. The kind of accident that feels like fate. The photo showed both of us outside his elementary school. I was wearing my cleaning uniform, having come straight from work to pick him up. He was holding my hand, smiling up at me like I was the most important person in the world. He stared at that photograph for hours, just sitting on my couch, turning it over in his hands, studying his own young face. That afternoon, without telling me his plans, he walked to the community shelter 3 blocks away and asked if they needed volunteers. He came home that evening looking different. Not happy, but less hollow. I helped serve meals today, he said quietly. One of the women there reminded me of you. Working 3 jobs, kids at home, trying so hard just to survive. And? I prompted. And I realized I've never actually helped anyone. I've only ever used people. I didn't contradict him. Sometimes the truth needs to be said out loud without cushioning. For the first time since the conference, I saw a flicker of the boy who used to call me his hero. Not the man he'd become, the boy he'd been before shame taught him to hide his roots. A local television station reached out wanting to do a feature on small business success stories in the community. They wanted to interview me as the owner of Veil and Pure, and they'd heard I had an interesting personal journey. Would you be willing to talk about your son as well? The producer asked. He's been volunteering at the shelter. It's a great angle, the redemption story. I hesitated. This could be good for business, but it also felt like opening a door I'd carefully closed. I'll do the interview, I said. But only if Julian agrees to participate honestly. The interview happened on a Tuesday afternoon. They set up cameras in my small kitchen, the heart of my business. Julian sat beside me, nervous in a way I'd never seen him. When the reporter asked about our relationship, about the struggles and the rebuilding, Julian spoke first. My mother taught me that dignity isn't about money or status, he said, his voice steady. It's about how you treat people when they can't do anything for you. I forgot that lesson for a long time. I'm trying to remember it now. For the first time in over a year, I believed he actually meant what he was saying. The interview aired that weekend. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support, new orders, and surprisingly, several people sharing their own stories of family estrangement and rebuilding. A month after the interview, a major investor contacted me. They wanted to buy Veil and Pure, offering an amount that would have changed my life completely. More money than I'd seen in 52 years combined. Julian, who'd moved into a tiny studio nearby and was working at the shelter full-time now, heard about the offer. Mom, you should take it, he said when he stopped by that evening. That's financial security forever. I looked at him surprised. You think I should sell? It's an incredible offer. You've worked so hard. You deserve to rest. I shook my head slowly. I built this from nothing, Julian. From shame and sadness and determination. This isn't just a business, it's proof that I matter, that I can create something valuable. I poured us both tea. I'm not selling my piece for profit. He smiled faintly, and something in his expression reminded me of his father, back when his father was still good. You're stronger than I ever was, Julian said quietly. Maybe, I replied. Or maybe I just finally learned that strength isn't about how much you can endure. It's about knowing when to say enough. We sat in comfortable silence, the scent of lavender surrounding us, and for the first time since the conference, the space between us felt less like a wound and more like a scar. Healed, if not forgotten. Julian's legal troubles reached their conclusion that fall. His former colleagues, the same ones who'd laughed at his conference jokes about his poor mother, publicly turned against him during the investigation. One even leaked internal emails showing Julian had actively encouraged the labor violations to cut costs. The trial was brief. He lost everything that remained of his business, his reputation, his professional future. He was ordered to pay fines he couldn't afford and banned from holding executive positions for 5 years. The night the verdict came through, he appeared at my door, pale and shaking. "I don't deserve your kindness," he whispered, barely able to meet my eyes. I looked at him standing in my doorway, this man who'd once stood on a stage and made me a punchline, now broken by his own choices. "No," I agreed. "You don't." He flinched as if I'd struck him. "But come in anyway," I added. We sat in my small living room, the place he'd been sleeping months before, and I made tea the way I always did when the world felt too heavy. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you rebuild," I said simply. "The same way I did. From nothing. With honesty." 2 years passed. Vale and Pure expanded into a second location. I hired 3 employees, all women rebuilding their lives after hardship. The shop became more than a business. It became a community space, a reminder that starting over was possible at any age. Julian worked steadily at the community shelter, eventually becoming their volunteer coordinator. He lived simply in his studio apartment, rode a bus to work, made his own meals. He called me once a week, never asking for anything, just checking in. Slowly, carefully, we rebuilt something that looked like a relationship. Not the same as before, something different, more honest. One afternoon, I attended a fundraiser for the shelter. Julian had organized the entire event, securing donations, coordinating volunteers, speaking with genuine passion about helping people in crisis. Watching him interact with the shelter residents, the way he listened without judgment, the way he remembered their names and their stories, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not pride in his success, pride in his character. After the event, we walked to my car together. "You're doing good work," I told him. "I'm trying to be the person I should have been all along," he replied. The contrast between our lives was stark. I'd risen, he'd fallen, but somehow we'd both landed in places more honest than where we'd been. Years after that conference room, after the humiliation and the silence and the rebuilding, I opened a 3rd shop location. This one was bigger, brighter, with space for workshops where I could teach others to make their own products. The grand opening was small, but meaningful. Therese came, bringing beautiful pottery for the shelves. The women I employed brought their families. Volunteers from the shelter attended. Julian showed up early to help set up chairs. As the afternoon wound down and guests began leaving, Julian approached me carrying a wrapped box. "I brought you something," he said, suddenly nervous like a child again. Inside was a framed photograph, not the one from the conference stage, but the one from his elementary school. The 2 of us, my cleaning uniform, his small hand in mine, both of us smiling. Below the image, he'd written in careful handwriting, "To the strongest person I know, thank you for teaching me that falling down isn't failure. Staying down is. Love, Julian." I looked at him, this man I'd raised and lost and found again in different form. "Thank you," I whispered. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said quietly. I smiled, remembering the conference room, the laughter, the shame, and how it had all become my liberation. Me too, I replied. Finally.